Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back. Today is Tuesday, September 11th, 2018. Yeah, you already know. So today we're just gonna have a pretty special episode. We're gonna be talking about that for a little bit and go from there.
Donald, you're probably the best known builder, particularly of great buildings in the city. There's a great deal of question about whether or not the damage and the ultimate destruction of the buildings was caused by the airplanes, by architectural defect, or possibly by bombs or aftershocks. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it was an architectural defect. You know, the World Trade Center was always known as a very, very strong building. Don't forget, that took a big bomb in the basement. Now, the basement is the most vulnerable place because that's your foundation, and it withstood that. And I got to see that area about 3 or 4 days after it took place because one of my structural engineers actually took me for a tour because he did the building. And I said, I can't believe it. The building was standing solid, and half of the columns were blown out. I mean, so this was an unbelievably powerful building. If you know anything about structure, it was one of the first buildings that was built from the outside. The steel, the reason the World Trade Center had such narrow windows is that in between all the windows, you had the steel on the outside. So you had the steel on the outside of the building. That's why when I first looked, and you had big, heavy I-beams. When I first looked at it, I couldn't believe it because there was a hole in the steel. And this is steel that was, you remember the width of the windows in the World Trade Center, folks. I think you know, if you were ever up there, they were quite narrow. And in between was this heavy steel. I said, how could a plane, even a 767 or 747 or whatever it might have been, how could it possibly go through the steel? I happen to think that they had not only a plane, but they had bombs that exploded almost simultaneously, because I just can't imagine anything being able to go through that wall. Most buildings are built with the steel is on the inside around the elevator shaft. This one was built from the outside, which is the strongest structure you can have, and it was almost just like a can of soup.
You know, Donald, we were looking at pictures all morning long of that plane coming into building number 2, and when you see that approach the far side, and then all of a sudden, within a matter of a millisecond, the explosion pops out the other side.
Right. I just think that it was a plane with more than just fuel. I think, obviously, they were very big planes. They were going very rapidly because I was also watching where the plane seemed to be not only going fast, it seemed to be coming down into the building. So it was getting the speed from going downhill, so to speak. It just seemed to me that to do that kind of destruction is even more than a big plane because you're talking about taking out steel, the heaviest caliber steel that was used on a building. I mean, these buildings were rock solid. And, you know, it's just an amazing thing. This country is different today, and it's going to be different than it ever was for many years to come.
So, in today's episode, we're just going to be talking about 9/11 and conspiracy theory, and, you know, I guess where I was at that day 17 years ago, what was going on, and so on and so forth. You know, that, as you can see from the video, even back then, from the very moment that happened, people were questioning it. I've always heard, you know, of all the conspiracy theories. You know, I'm sure you guys have already heard of a bunch of conspiracy theories that have to deal with this subject. And, you know, this is one of those rabbit holes that is not that hard. You know, I mean, it's pretty easy for us to see, like, wow, this happened. You know what I mean? Like, in the sense of, like, this was a false flag that was perpetrated by our own government. And it's pretty crazy. It really is, because it's, you don't have to go really that deep down the rabbit hole. You know, like how they found the passports of these two individuals in between all that rubble. That rubble, okay, which consisted of, you know, the hardest, toughest steel to burn, to destroy, to whatever in the world, and yet the buildings came down, they got destroyed, both simultaneously at the same time, like clockwork, and nothing survived except pieces of paper. And you know, the fact that, you know, you can go down can look down, you know, through many conspiracy theories on this, you know, and look at many videos of eyewitnesses that saw what happened when it happened, the moment of, so on and so forth, and you know, the evidence is all there that none of this makes any sense. And so now let's talk about why our own country would do that to itself. All right, and you know, the short answer, money. The shorter answer, well, is there a shorter answer? But the other short answer, for, you know, dominance in the Middle East. Before that, all we did was go out to Iraq during the Persian Gulf War and fight Saddam Hussein, you know, kill Saddam Hussein, get rid of Saddam Hussein because he was such a bad actor, and you know, so on and so forth. And so then, you know, we needed another reason to go out there, and not just go out there, but start taking over everything in all the territories.
Because I'd been through the Pentagon right after 9/11. About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who had used to work for me, and one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran." This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
And then Syria.
We had a chance to talk about a wide range of international issues, including the situation in Syria. And I have to say that all of us who've been seeing the terrible pictures coming out of Syria and Homs recently recognize it is absolutely imperative for the international community to rally and send a clear message to President Assad that it is time for a transition, it is time for that regime to move on, and it is time to stop the killing of Syrian citizens by their own government.
Lebanon.
They both had different reasons, the State Department and the White House, for wanting Israel to do it, encouraging them to do it, and supporting them. Our Air Force worked very closely with the Israeli Air Force for months before this, not necessarily with a deadline, knowing when it would happen. It was always going to be whenever there was an incident, they would take advantage of an incident. The word I used was fortunate timing. When Hezbollah grabbed some of the Israeli soldiers in early July, that was then a pretext, I think that's the only word, for a major offensive that had been in the works a long time.
Libya.
Today we can definitively say that the Gaddafi regime has come to an end. The last major regime strongholds have fallen. The new government is consolidating the control over the country, and one of the world's longest-serving dictators is no more.
Somalia.
Well, violence isn't only on the rise in Afghanistan. In fact, it looks like America's shadow wars have now increased by 1. Drone strikes have long been reported in Pakistan and Yemen, but now there's news that a week ago, a U.S. drone aircraft fired on 2 leaders of the Somalian organization Al-Shabaab.
Sudan.
President Obama is sending 100 combat-equipped troops to Central Africa to advise local forces on getting rid of one of the continent's most vicious operatives, Joseph Kony, the head of the Lord's Resistance Army, a group responsible for atrocities across the region. It's the first open deployment of U.S. ground combat power to Africa since the Black Hawk Down incident in Somalia in the 1990s that killed 18 troops. U.S. troops may wind up now in Uganda, South Sudan, the Central African Republic, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It's part of a growing military effort to engage in Africa.
Finishing off Iran. I said, is it classified? He said, yes, sir. I said, well, don't show it to me. And I saw him a year or so ago, and I said, you remember that? He said, sir, I didn't show you that memo. I didn't show it to you.
I'm sorry, what did you say his name was?
I'm not going to give you his name.
So go through the countries again?
Well, starting with Iraq, then Syria and Lebanon, then Libya, then Somalia and Sudan, and then back to Iran.
So we perpetrated this 9/11 situation so that it got everybody up in arms and excited, for war, so that the whole populace would, feel nothing but we have to go to war. I remember back then, I was very, very liberal, very left, very, and as soon as that happened, I remember that, I thought that the answer was war, and I was blind. I was a young kid. I was like in my early 20s, 21, 20. And it was pretty crazy, though, you know what I mean? Just, I remember everything, and it's just how we have come full circle now. And we all know that that whole war is a lie. That whole war was just for oil. We went out there, for absolutely no reason, destroyed. Well, I mean, there was reasons, but I mean, in the sense of like, we had no real... we had no real authority, no reason to go out there to do what we did. We just did it because we wanted to, and nobody could stop us. So that's it. That was the end of it. And you know what I mean? Like it's not good. You know what I mean? Like the fact that this country has done not just 9/11, but we've done other things like that before. Back during Pearl Harbor, it was the same thing. There was a bunch of people that would that were conspiracy theories. They're theorists. Talking about how we bombed ourselves in order to get into the war, and there's a lot of evidence that suggests so as well. So let's just keep talking about 9/11, because obviously that's what today is, right? And I guess what this day means to most Americans, what it normally means, and I guess what it should mean now. It's 9/11 should be the day, hopefully in the future, that we remember as the day in which, they attempted to trick us for the last time. And I know that might be a bit too much to say, and too much to think, in the sense that like, or to hope for, in the sense that like, the people would remember this day as that day, because we can go and talk about this forever, about what we do. We talk about the financial situation, about the biggest Ponzi scheme in the history of the world, which is the U.S. dollar. All the atrocities that this government has done to its people and people around the world, and so on and so forth. And listen, let's just go down through history. There's not like there's obviously been other worse regimes and worse governments and so on and so forth, but it's not to say that we've been an angel. And now with this impending economic crisis about to hit us, what 9/11 should be a reminder of more than anything else should be of the capabilities of this government and the central banks and the people in power, and what they are capable of doing or are willing to do in order to continue continue with their agenda and moving forward with what they want to move forward with. So, you know, again, this day should be not a day. I mean, it should be a day of mourning, obviously, you know, because of what happened. But it should also be a day of kind of like Independence Day. It should be a day of remembrance, a day of you know, realizing that, you know, this was maybe, you know, because it wasn't the last time that the government lied to us, because 2008 was another time. They're lying to us right now, and so on and so forth. And we could talk about a bunch of things like of what's going on right now. You know, I'll leave that for another video. This is just a 9/11 video. But again, what today should be, or a day to what 9/11 should be moving forward from here on out, should be a day to remember how our government sacrificed its people, blatantly lied to us just to push their agenda forward, and how we should be using this day and this knowledge and what we have now, knowing what we know, to not allow this to happen again. And when something like this is to happen again, that we don't automatically believe what they tell us, and they tell us, you know, who, that, you know, some other nation or person perpetrated whatever atrocity, and that we're not so quick to just jump the gun and listen and believe what they tell us, but instead, when something horrible happens like that again, that we sit back and we question our own government. We question, and we really question, and not just ourselves, but like our government and what happened, and investigate and do everything humanly possible before, again, blindly following some other person's agenda, or some government's agenda, or some central bank's agenda, or whatever. All right? Because lives are at stake, all right? And it's our lives that are at stake right now, and the world's population that's at stake right now. So we should keep educating ourselves, opening up our minds, waking the fuck up, helping people wake the fuck up, and making sure that nothing like this happens again. If something like this happens again, that we take the power, like take that opportunity and that ferocity. Because I remember back in 2001 when that happened, the whole nation, we were all like, you know what I mean, like willing to do anything. So if something like that were to happen again, that we today would get up, all right, and use that same energy and veracity to go up against the real perpetrators of all these heinous crimes, and stop being in denial and letting them continuously doing all these horrible things to us, and for us to finally wake the fuck up and do what's right for us and for everyone that we love. And that's it. You know, enough is enough. So definitely things are coming our way, all right? If it's not, you know, some natural disasters, it's the economic downturn, and so on and so forth. But, you know, don't be surprised that any kind of craziness that's coming out now is only going to be news that is going to be used in order to keep your eye off the ball, all right, which is the economy. Remember, the economy is about to get destroyed, and everyone's, you know, if everyone really knows what's going on, then, you know, things will be very different. So what propaganda, what mainstream media, what their job is to do is to create another hysteria or another point of interest, so that people focus on that and not focus on what's really going on and the real problem. Okay? Remember, right on September 10th, 2001, September 10th, 2001, the U.S. government announced that they lost $2.5 trillion. The next day, we have 9/11. So, you know, and we all forgot. We don't even know what the fuck happened there, right? With the 2.5 trillion. 2.5 trillion is like a drop in the bucket now. But again, you know, don't be surprised if, you know, if some crazy shit happens, you know, news, etc., and everyone's told to look away. And again, you know, right now, with all the indictments and all the things with Trump, and just to give you a quick example and everything that's happening there, we're quickly seeing that people are blind and not really looking at information and saying, we're getting Trump, but if you really look down at what's happening there, all that's happening is that it's going to start revealing everything that Obama did, everything that Podesta did, everything Hillary did, all these things that, so all of these things are going to start getting revealed, and they are starting to get revealed. So let's see. All right. Going to be some interesting times ahead. And we don't know what they are capable. Well, we know what they're capable of doing, but it could. It's just I'm knocking on wood here. All right. Just hope it's not any worse than anything we've already seen. All right. So, all right, guys. Let's hope that moving forward, 9/11 is a day that we use to remember how shitty our fucking government is, and that we start really waking the fuck up, and maybe use this day as a day to wake the fuck up, like a day to wake up, a day to get woke. 9/11 should be a day to get woke. All right. So, anyways, really appreciate you guys watching. Please like, please subscribe, please share, and thank you so much. And have a happy 9/11. Have a happy woke day. Peace out.